Hey guys, tonight we are stepping softly into the jet-scented, lipstick-checked, girdle-inspected, coffee-pouring, cigarette smoke-breathing, tray-balancing, hat-pinning world of the 1960s Stewardess, where your smile must be pleasant, your weight must remain within a range apparently negotiated by men with clipboards and very limited imaginations. Your hair must behave better at cruising altitude than most passengers do at sea level. Your gloves must stay white despite coffee, ashtrays, tomato juice, and human need. Your shoes must look polished even while quietly committing crimes against your toes. And somehow, the entire airline industry has decided that you are both a trained safety professional and a decorative reassurance that modern aviation has excellent manners. We are not talking about every airline, every country, every route, every stewardess, every passenger, every year of the decade, every airport, every union contract, every race, every class background, every woman who entered the job for adventure, every woman who entered because it paid better than the local office, every woman who was denied the job before she could even begin, or every cabin crew member who discovered that glamour and exhaustion could wear the same little hat. The experience varied enormously depending on whether you flew for a major American carrier, an international airline, a smaller regional route, a glamorous transatlantic service, a domestic hop full of businessmen, cigarettes, and one baby conducting private experiments in volume, a company still clinging to rules about age and marriage, or an airline slowly discovering that the civil rights era was not merely a thing happening somewhere on the ground. Some women genuinely loved the travel, the independence, the crisp uniform, the hotels, the cities, the feeling of walking through an airport while strangers stared as if you personally had invented altitude. Some found friendship, confidence, salaries of their own, and a wider world than the one their hometown had politely assigned them. But many also discovered that the price of being allowed into the sky was a remarkable list of instructions about their bodies, voices, faces, appetites, dating lives, sleep schedules, posture, manners, and the exact amount of personality considered safe for public service. Before we begin, you can like the video and subscribe if you enjoy drifting through the strange, inconvenient, very human corners of history, but only if you genuinely want to. No airline supervisor will appear beside your bed with a clipboard and ask whether your enthusiasm meets company standards, although she may check whether your blanket has been folded with sufficient cheer, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is there. There is something quietly wonderful about knowing that while someone is falling asleep in Toronto, another person is making tea in Manila, someone in Manchester has just remembered laundry in the machine, and someone in Ohio is standing in the kitchen at midnight eating cereal with the solemn focus of a passenger choosing between beef and chicken. The Quiet Hours is also on Spotify, so if you prefer to listen there while drifting off, you will find the link in the description. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan, pull your blanket up, and get completely comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let today's emails, bills, dishes, appointments, grocery prices, mysterious drawer keys, badly folded fitted sheets, and that one notification you have chosen to ignore with admirable discipline become the responsibility of a young woman in a tailored uniform carrying a tray of coffee through a cabin, full of smoke, knees, hats, elbows, and men who believe pushing the call button is a form of conversation. And before we begin, consider a few questions. How charming must you sound while explaining for the 5th time that the lavatory is occupied and not personally hiding from the passenger? How much hairspray is required before a beehive becomes structurally relevant to aviation? How many times can a woman be weighed before the scale begins to consider itself middle management? Is a hat still a hat if it must remain attached during turbulence, customer complaints, and a man asking whether the pilot is single? How white can gloves remain after serving coffee, tomato juice, roast beef, cigarettes, pillows, blankets, and emotional support to a cabin that has taken up smoking as a group project? Why did airlines market freedom by giving women a rulebook thick enough to require its own seat assignment? How softly must you say good morning to a passenger who has already complained about the weather, the seat, the food, the aisle, the window, the other passengers, and the fact that the aircraft is not a private miracle? What is the correct facial expression when someone calls you sweetheart while you are quietly memorizing emergency exits and calculating whether his hatbox is about to become a missile? How many shades of lipstick can be considered professional before the cosmetics counter begins issuing flight plans? What does it feel like to be told you represent modern womanhood, international sophistication, national glamour, feminine grace, passenger safety, and the airline's profit margin? All before breakfast? Congratulations. You have just awakened as a stewardess in 1960s air travel. Your uniform is pressed, your hair is pinned, your shoes are not comfortable but they are apparently moral. The cabin smells faintly of perfume, coffee, upholstery, jet fuel, and cigarette smoke. And beyond the terminal windows, a shining aircraft waits with more opinions than seats. Naturally, everyone must be greeted as if this was your idea. You sit in a waiting room with your handbag in your lap, your gloves folded neatly, and the strange awareness that the airline is not only interviewing your qualifications, but also your teeth, posture, waistline, voice, ankles, age, patience, and ability to look grateful while being assessed by furniture. The room smells of floor wax, perfume, wool coats, cigarette smoke, and ambition trying not to wrinkle. Other young women sit nearby, all pretending not to inspect one another, because the first unspoken rule of becoming a 1960s stewardess is that competition must look like friendship until the clipboard says otherwise. You have dressed carefully because care is the first language this job understands. Your suit is neat, your stockings are smooth, your hair has been persuaded into obedience, and your shoes make a small, serious sound on the floor whenever someone crosses to the desk and receives either a form, a smile, or the quiet finality of being told the company will keep her application on file. Everyone knows what that means. It means the file will rest in a drawer with the dignity of a hope that has already missed its flight. The airline calls the job service adventure, travel, and public contact, which all sound bright enough in a newspaper advertisement, but the room makes clear that the first test is whether you can become an image before anyone trusts you with coffee, safety equipment, or passengers who believe clouds should not inconvenience them. You may have finished school, worked in an office, taught for a while, helped at home, or saved enough money for the bus fare to this city because the stewardess job looks like a door out of ordinary expectations. It promises hotels, uniforms, new places, respectable independence, and the thrilling possibility of being paid to leave town without having to marry a man who owns a car. That alone is enough to make the whole room sit straighter. Still, the doorway is narrow. Airlines often want youth, health, height within a certain range, weight within a narrower range, good grooming, pleasant speech, clear skin, straight teeth, and the sort of cheerful femininity that seems to have been designed by a committee afraid of both plainness and personality. You answer questions about education, family, health, swimming ability, languages, customer service, willingness to relocate, and whether you can remain composed under pressure. You say yes, because no one has yet defined pressure as a passenger pressing a call button during turbulence to ask for tomato juice. An interviewer watches how you sit, how you stand, how you smile, how quickly your face recovers when a question catches you. Can you be firm without sounding unfeminine? Can you be attractive without seeming vain? Can you be intelligent without alarming anyone who prefers his coffee delivered by someone pleasantly decorative? The balance is absurd, but you sense it at once. Your future depends not only on being capable, but on making capability look graceful enough to sell tickets. There may be a measuring tape somewhere nearby, and if it does not appear, its spirit is certainly in the room. Some women are dismissed for being too short, too tall, too heavy, too old, too married in advance, too visibly independent, too much of something the airline has not learned to advertise. Others never reach the room at all because race, class, or local hiring assumptions have already done the sorting quietly before the chair could judge them. The glamour is real, but it has a doorman. You glance at the posters on the wall, bright aircraft lifting into blue skies where every cloud appears freshly laundered. They show travelers freedom, speed, elegance, and the future. They do not show the waiting room, the scale, the nervous fingers, the woman practicing a smile that must look natural after being requested. A receptionist calls names. Each woman rises as if summoned by destiny wearing sensible heels. The door opens, closes, opens again. Inside, someone is asked why she wants to become a stewardess, and the correct answer must contain adventure, service, poise, loyalty, and no hint that she would also enjoy earning money without asking permission. When your name is called, you stand, smooth your skirt, collect your handbag, and enter with the expression of someone who has never once doubted her own ankles. The interview room is arranged with a desk, chairs, ashtray, forms, and several people who have been trained to appear friendly while deciding whether your face belongs to the company's future. You sit when invited. You speak clearly. You smile warmly. You describe your love of people while privately hoping people can be stacked neatly and managed with tongs. The interviewers nod. One makes a note. Another asks about travel. Another studies your posture as if posture might be the last defense between civilization and a badly served luncheon tray. By the time you leave, you have not merely applied for a job. You have offered the airline a version of yourself. Polished, measured, agreeable, alert, young, and apparently able to reassure an entire aircraft with lipstick. The waiting room receives you again with its floor wax, perfume, and silent questions. Nobody asks how it went too directly. That would be rude, and this is aviation, where everything difficult must first be wrapped in manners. You stand in front of a scale under fluorescent light, wearing a smile that has been trained to remain present even while your body is being translated into company policy. A supervisor checks a chart as if the fate of aviation depends on whether you and gravity have reached a respectable agreement. The room is clean, bright, and quietly merciless, with polished linoleum, metal filing cabinets, a mirror that seems to be cooperating with management, and the peculiar hush that comes over women when everyone knows the rule but nobody is meant to call it cruel. You step forward because stepping back would look dramatic, and drama is not encouraged unless it is printed in an advertisement with a smiling stewardess beside a jet. The scale clicks, settles, hesitates, and announces its opinion with the confidence of an object that has never had to survive on airport coffee and irregular sleep. You keep your shoulders easy. You keep your face calm. You have already learned that the body, in this line of work, is not treated as a private fact. It is part of the uniform, part of the brand, part of the passenger experience, part of a marketing department's belief that a woman can embody safety, romance, and portion control at the same time. The supervisor may be polite. She may even be sympathetic. She may once have stood where you stand, holding her breath as if oxygen itself might weigh something. But the chart has no sympathy. It has columns. It has numbers. It has the awful serenity of paper that cannot be embarrassed. Airlines in this period often impose weight rules with a precision that makes no allowance for layovers, birthdays, water retention, grief, holiday meals, or the fact that bodies are not luggage and should not be tagged accordingly. A few pounds can become a warning. A pattern can become a meeting. A meeting can become suspension, probation, or another polite sentence with teeth. You may be told it is about appearance. You may be told it is about uniform fit. You may be told passengers expect a certain image. The passengers naturally have not been weighed at the door before demanding second helpings of dinner and a whiskey to accompany their opinions. That is not considered relevant. Your stockinged feet remain still on the cool metal platform. You can smell face powder, disinfectant, and cigarette smoke drifting from somewhere outside the room. The fluorescent light flattens everyone into honesty. Around you are women who have learned private arithmetic, what to eat before a check, what to skip, how to refuse dessert without looking anxious, how to pack a suitcase with uniforms, hair rollers, and the possibility of hunger. Some diets are sensible, some are strange, and some are just exhaustion wearing a respectable name. You learn that appetite must become discreet. Food is fuel, but also evidence. A sandwich can be lunch, comfort, or a small act of rebellion, depending on who is looking. This is one of the quieter cruelties of the glamorous job. The airline sells abundance to passengers with menus, cocktails, desserts, and warm rolls, while the women serving them may be worrying about whether a scale will remember every bite. You do not say this aloud. You stand still and let the number become part of your file. Height matters too. You must be tall enough to reach, not so tall that the aircraft looks small around you, not too short for overhead compartments, not too imposing for the soft feminine image being sold to nervous travelers. The requirements vary by airline, by year, by route, by the taste of executives, and by whatever the company imagines elegance looks like when seated beside a tray of chicken. Yet the effect is consistent. Your body becomes something to maintain not simply for health, but for permission. If you pass, there is relief, but relief has a short shelf life. The next check is already waiting somewhere in the future, wearing sensible shoes. If you do not pass, there may be advice, warnings, humiliation softened with professional vocabulary, or a temporary removal from flying until your body returns to the approved version of itself. The room does not need to raise its voice. That is why it works. A quiet rule can be heavier than a shouted one, especially when it follows you into restaurants, hotel rooms, holidays, and family kitchens where your mother wants to feed you because mothers have not been briefed by airline management. You step off the scale and adjust your skirt, though nothing has actually shifted except your sense of ownership over yourself. Another woman steps forward. The metal platform receives her with the cold patience of a clerk. You gather your gloves and try to appear casual, because appearing casual is the final courtesy demanded by any system that has just made you anxious. Later, you may serve passengers roast beef, rolls, salads, cake, cream, sugar, and coffee with a steady hand. You may smile while a man asks for more dessert and then compliments your figure as if he has discovered manners at the bottom of a glass. You may thank him, because the script requires gratitude from the person being inspected, not from the person inspecting. For now, the chart is satisfied, the supervisor makes a note, and aviation may proceed, having confirmed that the woman responsible for emergency evacuation also meets the moral expectations of a skirt. You arrive at stewardess training with a suitcase, a regulation dress, a pair of uncomfortable shoes, and the optimistic belief that flying will be glamorous once you have memorized every safety command. Service ritual, grooming standard, emergency drill, an acceptable way to stand near a beverage cart without looking like a woman who has feet. The classroom smells of chalk, starch, hairspray, coffee, and polished wood. You learn evacuation commands, first aid, meal service, cabin etiquette, aircraft equipment, and how to make fear sound like information delivered pleasantly over a public address system. At first, training seems almost like finishing school that has been placed too close to machinery. There are lessons in posture, diction, makeup, grooming, passenger psychology, and how to hold yourself so the uniform looks as if it has chosen you personally. Then the instructor begins discussing oxygen, exits, rafts, fire extinguishers, decompression, crash positions, emergency slides, and the possibility that several dozen adults may one day look at you with the sudden helplessness of people who cannot remember how a seatbelt works. The contrast is striking. In 1 hour, you are learning how to arrange a meal tray with grace. In the next, you are shouting commands strongly enough to move a cabin through fear. It turns out the pretty job has hinges, latches, procedures, and consequences. The public may imagine you floating down aisles with coffee and perfume, but the training school knows better. It knows that an aircraft is a machine moving through weather, and a cabin is a narrow social experiment in which every passenger brings baggage, nerves, habits, and an alarming amount of confidence. You are taught the aircraft layout until the exits live in your mind like furniture in your childhood home. You learn where equipment is stored, how to check it, how to report problems, how to secure the galley, how to count passengers, how to watch for illness, drunkenness, fear, confusion, and the small signs that a person may become your responsibility before the seatbelt sign is off. You practice smiling, but you also practice command voice. This is not the pleasant voice of offering coffee. This is the voice that must slice through panic without sounding panicked itself. You repeat short orders until your throat feels dry and the instructor is satisfied that you can be heard over engines, crying, smoke, or a businessman discovering that his briefcase is not the priority. There are drills for water landings, though everyone prefers not to imagine the water too clearly. There are demonstrations of life vests, oxygen masks, evacuation routes, and how to keep passengers moving when passengers have suddenly become attached to their belongings with spiritual intensity. You learn first aid, not as a nurse with a quiet ward and supplies neatly arranged, but as a stewardess in a moving cabin where a fainting passenger, a frightened child, an airsick traveller, or a man with too many cocktails may require calm attention while someone else asks for a pillow. You are taught to notice everything without appearing to stare. That skill will become useful. Training includes service too, because the airline sells elegance and expects it to survive altitude. You learn how to serve meals quickly, how to pour coffee without splashing, how to present trays, how to handle special requests, how to manage complaints, how to answer repeated questions, and how to maintain cheer while an aircraft full of adults behaves like a dining room designed by a very narrow hallway. You practice in mock cabins, where the seats behave better than real passengers will. You learn to bend, reach, brace, step sideways, turn gracefully, and avoid bumping elbows, hats, newspapers, knees, and the person who has fallen asleep exactly where you need to stand. A beverage cart has its own personality. It is heavy, useful, stubborn, and willing to reveal weakness. You respect it early. There may be language training, geography, customs, ticket classes, route information, and names of cities that sound glamorous until you realize you may see them mostly through hotel curtains. You study company rules because every airline has a culture, and every culture has a way of making its preferences look inevitable. Uniform rules, weight rules, hair rules, nail rules, jewelry rules, speech rules, dating rules, smoking rules, lodging rules, conduct rules. The rulebook grows like a vine around the promise of freedom. Still, there is excitement beneath the discipline. You are learning a skilled job. You are entering a modern industry. You are being taught to handle yourself in public, in airports, in hotels, in emergencies, in rooms full of men who may assume your politeness means you are less trained than you are. You make friends. You trade pins, powder, aspirin, advice, laughter, and fear. At night, in the dormitory or training lodging, you rub your feet, set your hair, study notes, and discover that adventure has homework. Some women leave, some are dismissed. Some decide the job is not worth being examined from hat to heel. Some stay because the world beyond training still glows through the window, and because the first time you imagine yourself walking through an airport in uniform, the exhaustion sits up and pays attention. By the end, you know how to serve dinner, soothe nerves, fight fire, open exits, check equipment, calm a cabin, and keep lipstick presentable through all of it. The airline will advertise the smile. You will know how much drilling is hiding behind it. You button the jacket, straighten the skirt, pin the hat, check the gloves, inspect the shoes, and realize that the uniform has entered the room before you have. It is tailored, crisp, polished, and designed to suggest competence, femininity, discipline, and just enough glamour to make air travel feel expensive even when the passenger has already removed his shoes in spirit. The fabric smells of dry cleaning and responsibility. You are not simply dressed for work. You are wearing the airline's promise that modern travel will be elegant, orderly, and served with coffee by someone whose hemline has been approved. The uniform is a public document made of cloth. It tells strangers how to look at you before you have said good morning. It tells passengers that the company is modern, safe, polished, and feminine, in a way that will not cause concern at dinner tables or board meetings. It tells supervisors whether you have followed the rules. It tells other stewardesses which airline claims you. It tells your family back home that the job is respectable, although your feet may have a different opinion after a long route. You smooth the jacket with both hands and feel the hidden architecture of tailoring. Seams, lining, buttons, pockets that are decorative enough to be morally disappointing, and a skirt cut to allow movement while still reminding you that movement was not the designer's only priority. Some uniforms are stylish and genuinely handsome. Some are chic enough to make airport terminals seem briefly like fashion runways with baggage carts. Others are practical only in the sense that someone in an office once successfully imagined a woman standing still. The early jet age loves design. It loves sleek lines, neat hats, gloves, trim jackets, bright scarves, polished shoes, and the visual reassurance that a woman moving through a terminal can make technology look hospitable. You learn to carry that meaning carefully. A wrinkle is not just a wrinkle, it is evidence. A missing button is a small collapse in civilization. A hat at the wrong angle suggests that someone has let personal gravity interfere with corporate identity. The hat especially has power beyond its size. It may be small, decorative, perched, pinned, or shaped like an object that lost an argument with geometry, but it completes the image. Without it, you may feel like yourself. With it, you become the airline's representative, which is a glamorous way of saying that strangers now believe they may ask you where the restroom is even when you are not in the aircraft. Gloves add another layer of ceremony. White gloves look clean, formal, ladylike, and faintly impossible. They imply refinement while requiring you to touch trays, railings, blankets, coffee pots, magazines, ashtrays, and seat backs that have already met the public. Keeping them clean is less a task than a moral fable. Shoes are polished, coordinated, and chosen to complete the line of the uniform, not necessarily to honor the bones of the foot. You stand in them, walk terminals in them, serve in them, brace against turbulence in them, and smile in them as if comfort were a rumor from another department. The uniform also changes how people speak to you. A woman in ordinary clothes may be ignored. A woman in an airline uniform becomes visible, admired, questioned, judged, flirted with, corrected, and summoned. Children stare with open wonder. Men stare with less innocence. Older women may inspect the cut, the grooming, the posture, perhaps remembering their own uniforms from offices, hospitals, wartime service, or schools. Everyone seems to understand that you represent something beyond yourself. The trouble is that representation can become a cage with good tailoring. If you are tired, the uniform must not look tired. If you are annoyed, the uniform must remain pleasant. If you are frightened, the uniform must reassure. If a passenger behaves badly, the uniform must absorb the moment and return it as service. You may begin to feel that the outfit has more rights than the woman inside it. It is protected, cleaned, stored, inspected, issued, returned, altered, and defended by company manuals. Your own needs are handled more quietly, often after landing, when the last passenger has left with his coat, his complaint, and his belief that flying is glamorous because he never had to wear the hat. Yet there is pride too. You catch sight of yourself in a terminal window and understand why the job drew so many women. The uniform is sharp. It moves through space with authority. It opens doors, attracts attention, and marks you as part of the modern world. You are not behind a desk in a hometown office. You are crossing airports, boarding aircraft, learning cities, earning wages, and carrying yourself with a polish that your younger self might have found dazzling. That pride is real, even when the rules around it are narrow. You hang the uniform carefully at night, because tomorrow it must perform again. The jacket rests on a hanger, the skirt falls straight, the hat sits where it cannot be crushed, and the shoes wait beneath like two polished witnesses. In the morning, you will put it all on and become official. The uniform may not be comfortable, but comfort was never its assignment. It was designed to make the airline look effortless, which is always easiest when the effort belongs to someone else. You stand before a mirror while your hair, makeup, nails, stockings, girdle, hat, gloves, perfume, and general brightness are reviewed with the seriousness usually reserved for aircraft maintenance. The room glows with vanity bulbs and quiet judgment. Lipstick must be present but not dramatic. Hair must be fashionable but not rebellious. Nails must look cared for without suggesting you have a private life involving bold colour decisions. You learn that in this profession, a loose strand of hair can become a personnel issue before the aircraft has even reached the gate. The inspection begins before anyone officially calls it inspection. It lives in the mirror, in the supervisor's glance, in the company manual, in the sideways look from another stewardess who has already noticed that your scarf is a fraction too lively, and in your own hands as you smooth, tuck, powder, pin, and correct yourself before someone else can. Grooming is not treated as decoration. It is discipline with lipstick. Your face must look fresh after too little sleep, after a delayed flight, after a hotel radiator spent the night making sounds like an elderly instrument, after coffee from a paper cup, after passengers smoke through the cabin as if the aircraft were a private chimney with wings. Foundation must be even, rouge discreet, mascara controlled, eyebrows shaped, powder available, and lipstick applied in a shade that suggests femininity, health, cheer, and absolutely no dangerous ideas. A lipstick can be too pale, too bold, too fashionable, too careless, too absent, or too much like something chosen by a woman for her own reasons. The correct shade lives somewhere between corporate confidence and not frightening the men in first class. Hair is another department entirely. Depending on the airline, route, and moment in the decade, it may be swept, rolled, bobbed, flipped, sprayed, pinned, or arranged into a controlled style that can survive wind, hat pressure, cabin dryness, and the curious hostility of time zones. Hairspray becomes structural support. Bobby pins become private engineering. A scarf may hide trouble briefly, but it cannot save an undisciplined head forever. You learn which styles fit under the hat, which ones flatten, which ones rise too much, which ones start the morning as elegance, and end the evening as weather damage. The hat is placed, checked, adjusted, checked again. It must look effortless, although by now effort has formed a small committee around your skull. Nails are inspected because hands are visible in service. They pour, pass, lift, point, demonstrate comfort and take away used cups. A chipped nail suggests disorder. A dramatic colour suggests personality. A rough cuticle suggests the tragic possibility that the stewardess is human. 2. Stockings must be smooth, seams straight if seams are present, runs repaired or hidden until replacement is possible, and spare pairs kept with the seriousness of emergency supplies. A run in a stocking can feel, in the moment, more urgent than weather over Chicago, because weather at least has a department. The girdle adds its own quiet regime. It shapes, supports, controls, and reminds you with every breath that the modern woman has been promised freedom, provided she first agrees to elastic supervision. You fasten, smooth, adjust, and pretend that breathing shallowly is elegance. Perfume must be light, if allowed, because the cabin already contains coffee, cologne, upholstery, nervous stomachs, jet fuel, and an amount of cigarette smoke that could season furniture. Too much scent becomes a passenger complaint. Too little polish becomes a supervisor's note. The middle path is narrow and powdered. You begin to understand that grooming is a performance of stability. Passengers may not know how the aircraft works. They may not know the weather, the route, the maintenance schedule, or the training behind your smile, but they can see whether your lipstick is steady. A polished appearance tells them, absurdly but effectively, that things are under control. If your hair is tidy, perhaps the engines are also trustworthy. If your gloves are white, perhaps the clouds have been properly arranged. This is not rational, but air travel has always borrowed from ritual. People like symbols when they're being carried through the sky in a metal tube. You become one of those symbols, which is flattering until the symbol gets tired. There is also the constant awareness of being watched by passengers who confuse grooming with invitation, by supervisors who confuse appearance with character, by other women who know the rules because they live under them too, and by yourself, most relentlessly of all. You carry a compact, comb, lipstick, pins, and powder as if maintaining a small mobile embassy of femininity. In airport restrooms, hotel rooms, crew lounges, and tiny aircraft lavatories, you repair the evidence of labour. You blot, brush, smooth, and reapply. The work must not show on the worker. That is the great secret of this kind of glamour. It is allowed to exist only if it denies having been assembled. By the time inspection ends, you look fresh, composed, bright, and ready. The supervisor nods. The mirror returns the approved version of you. Somewhere nearby, an aircraft waits with smoke, coffee, turbulence, cramped aisles, and several dozen people prepared to undo the morning's work. You pick up your gloves and go meet them beautifully. You learn early that the airline prefers you young, unmarried, childless, available, pleasant, and not yet attached to any future that might interfere with the schedule. Marriage is not simply a private decision. It is a potential violation of the company's fantasy that you exist in a permanent state of polished possibility, ready to fly, smile, relocate, and serve coffee without a household asking where you have been. The rule does not announce itself as loneliness. It arrives dressed as policy, with neat typing, polite language, and the cold little implication that a ring could end a career faster than turbulence. You hear about it first in training, perhaps from an instructor who says it briskly, as if discussing shoe polish, or from another stewardess who has already watched a friend become engaged and then disappear from the schedule with the quiet efficiency of a coat being removed from a closet. In many airlines during these years, marriage rules or marriage expectations remain part of the job's architecture, even when they vary by company, route, seniority, and the legal pressure beginning to gather around them. The stewardess is meant to look eligible, mobile, attentive, and unclaimed by domestic obligations. A husband, according to this logic, is not a person. He is a scheduling conflict wearing a ring. Children are even more unthinkable, not because mothers cannot be competent, but because the airline's image has been built around a young woman who belongs everywhere and nowhere, fresh in every city, available for every trip, and somehow free of laundry, rent, in-laws, morning sickness, school lunches, and any human need that cannot be folded into a crew bag. You may find this absurd even while living inside it. The The job has promised escape from the narrow assumption that every woman's life must move directly from father's house to husband's house, yet it keeps its own little fence around your future. It offers travel, wages, hotels, and independence, then leans close and explains that independence is welcome only if it remains decorative and temporary. You can fly to California, Chicago, New York, London, or Honolulu, but do not get carried away and imagine the company has mistaken you for a full adult with private plans. The rule follows you into conversations. A passenger asks whether you are married because politeness has apparently taken a brief rest in the overhead rack. You smile and answer lightly, perhaps saying no, perhaps deflecting, perhaps wondering why strangers believe your left hand is public information. In the crew room, women discuss boyfriends, engagements, pilots, men back home, and the dangerous romance of someone who understands your schedule badly enough to admire it. Some stewardesses postpone marriage. Some keep relationships quiet. Some accept that the job may last only until a proposal, a birthday, a policy change, or the slow pressure of family expectations calls them down to earth. Others push back, especially as the decade changes and women begin challenging rules that treat their personal lives as corporate property. But change is not immediate. It arrives through complaints, legal cases, union pressure, quiet anger, and the stubborn realization that serving coffee in flight does not require being romantically available in theory. Still, you are living in the middle of the old rule, not at the comfortable end of the story. Your mother may ask whether you have met anyone nice. Your aunt may suggest the job is exciting for now. For now is the phrase people use when they want to admire your freedom without granting it permanence. At family gatherings, you are praised for being adventurous, and then asked when you will settle down, as if travel is a fever and marriage the recommended blanket. You do not necessarily reject marriage. You may want it deeply. You may want a home, children, stability, or someone who knows your real voice when the stewardess voice has been put away. You may not want any of it yet. You may simply want the decision to belong to you rather than to a manager, a manual, or a line on an employment form. The tension is quiet, but it sits beside you in hotel rooms and airport lounges. You remove your hat, brush out your hair, and wonder how long this version of life is allowed to last. There is no villain required, though there are certainly policies doing excellent villain work without the cape. The airline sells romance in advertisements, with elegant women crossing oceans and smiling beside men in suits, but it becomes nervous when romance asks for a date, a church, a license, and a name change. You learn to keep your private life neat, discreet, and unthreatening. A ring in a jewelry box can feel heavier than a suitcase. A letter from home can carry more turbulence than the route ahead. The irony is tidy enough to fit in a company envelope. You are trusted to help evacuate passengers, calm panic, handle illness, serve hundreds, cross time zones, and represent modern air travel, but a husband might make you unsuitable for coffee. You are young enough to be hired, old enough to serve businessmen cocktails with professional warmth, and already close enough to the company's invisible expiration date to feel time sitting beside you in the jump seat. In many airlines, age rules turn the job into a glamorous hourglass. You may travel, earn, learn cities by their airport carpets, and collect hotel soap from places your mother has never seen. But the calendar keeps its own seniority list. The cabin lights glow softly, passengers unfold newspapers, and somewhere in the rulebook your future is written in a number nobody blushes to print. The strange thing is how early the ending enters the room. You may be newly trained, still learning how to brace your knees during service and how to keep your hat from migrating under airport air conditioning. Yet already there is talk of the age when a stewardess becomes too old for the image. Too old does not mean unable to work. It does not mean unable to open an exit, soothe a nervous flyer, handle a medical problem, or identify the passenger who has decided the ashtray is too small for his ambitions. It means no longer fitting a fantasy of youth that the airline has polished until it shines brighter than common sense. The rule may vary by company and era, and some limits are challenged as the decade moves on. But the message is unmistakable. You are not only working a route, you are working against a clock. The airline does not say this with cruelty every day. It does not have to. It says it through hiring ages, retirement expectations, jokes, rumors, charts, and the way older women are treated as if experience were a wrinkle rather than a skill. You notice who is missing. In the cabin, the passengers may include middle-aged men making decisions, older men traveling for business, elderly passengers needing assistance, mothers with children, widows, grandmothers, and women whose lives have already filled several chapters. But the stewardess is expected to remain in a narrow opening sentence. Young, polished, bright, unmarried or suitably unburdened, with enough experience to handle problems and not so much time behind her that anyone must admit skill can mature. It is an odd sort of arithmetic. You may be trusted with emergencies at 23 and considered past the company's preferred image not long afterward, as if professional competence has the shelf life of a tea sandwich left under cabin lighting. The age limit turns birthdays into private inspections. A birthday cake may look cheerful, but somewhere beneath the frosting is a memo wearing a party hat. Friends joke about it because joking is easier than fear. Someone says she has a few good years left. Someone says she will marry before the company has to notice. Someone says she wants to move into training, reservations, public relations, or groundwork if they will have her. Someone says nothing and studies the polish on her nails. You learn that youth is not merely celebrated, it is consumed. The job takes your energy, your sleep, your feet, your patience, your holidays, and your best smile, then hints that the arrangement is temporary because the public has apparently placed an order for freshness and does not wish to be confronted with evidence that women continue aging after takeoff. Yet age also gives you mastery. After enough flights, you know where passengers get nervous, when coffee should wait, which baby cries from pressure in the ears, which businessman is going to complain before he opens his mouth, and which galley latch needs a firmer hand. You know how weather feels before the captain announces it. You can read a cabin the way a homemaker reads a pantry, noticing what will run out, what is about to spill, and who needs attention before asking for it. That knowledge is not glamorous in advertisements, because advertisements prefer legs, hats, and a smile young enough to suggest that labour has not left a mark. But inside the aircraft, experience is worth more than a perfect birthday. You may fly with newer girls who watch you for cues. You show them how to move the cart without bruising every aisle seat, how to tuck a blanket without waking a passenger, how to answer a flirtation without feeding it, how to keep calm when the aircraft drops and 50 faces look toward you. You are older than some of them by only a few years, but in airline time that can feel like being an elder stateswoman with better lipstick. At night in a layover hotel, you may look in the mirror and search for signs the company will notice before you are ready. The light above the sink is unkind, as hotel lighting often is, perhaps because hotels have never been properly introduced to mercy. You remove makeup, unpin hair, rub your feet, and let your actual face return. It is not old. It is tired, capable, and increasingly aware that a rulebook can confuse youth with worth. The decade outside is changing, slowly, unevenly, with women questioning marriage bars, age rules, and the old decorative assumptions that made the job both thrilling and unfair. But tonight, the schedule is still the schedule. Tomorrow, you will put on the uniform again, walk through the terminal, and become the bright young face of modern travel, while the calendar, that quiet passenger, waits without pressing the call button. You practice the stewardess voice until it becomes smooth enough to pour. It must be warm, clear, feminine, calm, and firm only in emergencies, which is a difficult recipe when a passenger is asking for another pillow, another drink, a different seat, a cigarette light, a blanket, a magazine, and reassurance that the strange sound from the wing is not the beginning of a newspaper headline. Your voice becomes a tool, a curtain, a tray, a bandage, and occasionally a small fence. It must never sound tired, even when your feet are conducting a private labour dispute inside your shoes. You learn the voice in training, but you perfect it in the aisle, where every word must travel through engine noise, cigarette smoke, clinking cups, newspaper rustle, and the private weather systems of passengers who have brought fear, impatience, vanity, hunger, and perfume into the same narrow space. Good morning. May I help you? We will be landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelt. The lavatory is occupied. No, sir, the clouds are not something we can move to the left. Each phrase must sound fresh. Even when it has been used so often it should legally qualify as upholstery. The voice must reassure without promising too much. It must soothe the nervous flyer without inviting a full confession about his fear of heights, childhood, an uncle who once saw a plane from a field. It must guide the difficult passenger without letting him realize he is being guided. because some men prefer instruction if it is disguised as admiration for their cooperation. It must soften delays, explain meals, quiet complaints, and carry safety instructions through a cabin that may be listening, may be ignoring you, or may be studying your lipstick instead. This is emotional labor before anyone has given it a tidy name. You manage feeling as part of the service. Your own irritation must be folded small and placed out of sight, like a coat in an overhead compartment. A passenger may call you honey, sweetheart, miss, girl, stewardess, or by no name at all, just a raised finger and the little royal flick of someone summoning weather. You answer as if language has not briefly failed society. The trick is to keep warmth from becoming surrender. Too soft, and passengers hear permission. Too sharp, and someone may decide you are unfriendly, difficult, unfeminine, or not suited to service, as if firmness from a woman is a stain that cannot be removed from the uniform. You are allowed authority in emergencies, but even then it must arrive suddenly enough to startle people into obedience. In ordinary service, authority wears powder. You learn to place steel inside silk. When turbulence begins, the voice changes slightly. Not much, enough. You ask passengers to return to their seats, fasten belts, put out cigarettes when required, and let you secure the cabin. You may feel the aircraft shift under your feet, but your voice must remain level, because passengers look to you for permission to be calm. If you sound frightened, the cabin will hear it before the engines do. If you sound bored, they may relax. Boredom, carefully performed, can be a public safety tool. There is also the public address microphone, that small instrument of judgment. The first time you use it, you may hear your own voice enlarged and floating above rows of hats, hair, smoke, and turned faces. You become everywhere at once. You welcome passengers aboard, name the captain, mention weather, altitude, arrival time, safety reminders, and whatever the airline has decided must sound cheerful. You speak slowly enough for clarity, lightly enough for elegance, and calmly enough to make the metal tube seem less improbable. A public address announcement is a spell everyone pretends is not a spell. It turns engine noise into progress, delay into patience, turbulence into a brief rough patch, and the complicated business of flying into something as orderly as a tea service with clouds. The voice is not only for passengers, it is also for crew. You use it with pilots, gate agents, fellow stewardesses, hotel clerks, taxi drivers, supervisors, and the woman at home on the telephone who asks if you are eating enough. With other stewardesses, your real voice may return in pieces, tired, funny, sharper, warmer, less polished. In the galley, behind the curtain, you may say what you cannot say in the aisle. You may sigh. You may laugh quietly. You may describe a passenger with such exact politeness that the insult requires no rude words at all. Then the curtain opens, and the service voice returns, bright as a lamp being switched on. By the end of a long day, it can feel as if the voice has been working separately from the rest of you, smiling from the throat while your body counts hours. It has said thank you, certainly, very good, I am sorry, yes sir, one moment, right away, please, and of course so many times that the words begin to float loose from meaning. Still, the voice has power. It can calm a child, steady an anxious woman, quiet a rude man, organize a cabin, and carry professional skill through an industry that keeps mistaking charm for decoration. You learn that pleasantness is not always weakness. Sometimes it is a tool with a handle hidden inside it. The airline may have hired the smile, but the voice is what gets everyone through the flight. You step through the airport terminal with your crew bag in one hand, your hat pinned at the proper angle, and the odd sensation that the entire building has turned into a hallway of eyes. Men in suits glance over newspapers. Children stare as if you live in the sky permanently. Women look at the uniform with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, suspicion, and perhaps the quiet relief of not having to keep white gloves clean for a living. The floor shines beneath your heels. The loudspeaker murmurs destinations. For a few minutes before the work begins, glamour performs its most convincing trick. The terminal is made for that trick. It has polished floors, high windows, ticket counters, clocks, signs, ashtrays, waiting chairs, glass doors, and the constant gentle drama of people leaving one place before they have emotionally arrived at the next. Suitcases stand upright like small obedient relatives. Porters move with carts. Businessmen check watches. Families gather near gates with paper tickets, coats, purses, children, and the faint look of people who have dressed too carefully for sitting. The air smells of wax, tobacco, perfume, shoe leather, coffee, newsprint, and, from beyond the glass, the sharper promise of jet fuel. You walk through it all as part of the scenery and part of the machinery. The stewardess in uniform is one of the airport's great visual promises. She tells the public that air travel is not just transport. It is modern, orderly, feminine, glamorous, and safe enough to be entered by women in heels. That message is flattering until you remember you are the one wearing the heels. You feel the gaze before you name it. A girl points and whispers to her mother. A teenage boy forgets subtlety at an age when subtlety was already unlikely. A businessman looks up from the financial page, lets his eyes follow the line of the uniform, then returns to the paper with the expression of a man who believes he has behaved. An older woman studies your hat and shoes as if comparing them with a private standard of respectability. You smile when appropriate. You do not linger. Movement is part of the performance. A stewardess standing still too long becomes available for questions, comments, directions, flirtation, complaints, and one elderly passenger who wants to know whether the flight will be bumpy because her hip has opinions about barometric pressure. The terminal walk is public labour disguised as glamour. You must look composed though your schedule may have begun before dawn. You must look fresh though you may have slept badly in a hotel room with a radiator that spent the night practicing Morse code. You must look delighted to be going somewhere, even if somewhere is a turnaround flight, a delayed gate, or a city you will see only through a taxi window and a crew lounge clock. Your crew bag is heavier than it looks, because glamour always hides weight somewhere. Inside are makeup, stockings, personal items, perhaps a book, paperwork, a small sewing kit, aspirin, and the private supplies of a woman who has learned not to trust schedules, weather, or hotel shampoo. You pass ticket counters where agents work with practiced patience, writing, stamping, checking, smiling, and absorbing the first wave of passenger worry before it reaches the aircraft. You pass posters showing bright skies and smiling travellers who have no visible luggage because advertising prefers passengers after they have been improved by imagination. You pass men who are travelling for work and women who may be travelling for family, funerals, honeymoons, holidays, or a new life in another city. Air travel in the 1960s is becoming more accessible, but still carries ceremony for many people. Some passengers dress up because flying is an event. Hats appear, gloves appear. Children are scrubbed, men wear suits, women carry handbags with tissues folded inside because someone will need one before landing. You are part of that ceremony, and everyone expects you to look as if you know what it means. The terminal also reveals who belongs easily. Some people move through it with the confidence of expense accounts and frequent travel. Others clutch tickets like documents from another government. Some families count bags, children, and money with equal concern. Some women look at you and see possibility. Wages, movement, cities, a life that can be described with airport names. Others see a warning. Rules about bodies, age, manners, and male attention packaged as freedom. Both are right. That is the difficult thing about glamour. It can be real and still have fine print. As you near the gate, your crew gathers in fragments. Another stewardess joins you, hat perfect, lipstick refreshed, eyes already measuring the crowd. A pilot passes with the easy authority of a man whose uniform has not been asked to make his waistline inspirational. The gate agent looks relieved to see the crew, because passengers become more patient when the symbols arrive. Outside the window, the aircraft waits, silver and clean, its nose pointed toward weather, schedules, and all the little human dramas currently holding tickets. You pause only briefly, long enough to check the time, your gloves, and the fact that your smile is still ready. Then you walk toward the door. Behind you, the terminal continues its soft theatre of departures. Ahead of you, the real work waits in a cabin that will soon make glamour earn its wages. You enter the aircraft before the passengers and breathe in upholstery, metal, cold air, coffee, cleaning fluid, perfume, and the faint ghost of cigarette smoke already waiting for company. By the 1960s, the jet age has made flying faster and more glamorous, but not necessarily quieter, cleaner, or kinder to the lungs. Ashtrays sit ready in armrests like little metal invitations to turn the cabin into a lounge with altitude. You check seatbelts, magazines, pillows, blankets, overhead bins, and emergency equipment, while knowing that within minutes this narrow tube will contain luggage, nerves, aftershave, impatience, and several men asking where to hang their coats. For the moment, though, the cabin belongs to the crew. It is still, chilled and waiting, with rows of seats facing forward in obedient lines, windows glowing pale with daylight, and the aisle stretching ahead like a little road that will soon become your workplace, dining room, complaint counter, first aid station, and obstacle course. You move through it carefully, touching the backs of seats, checking pockets, noticing what cleaners missed, what passengers will ask for, what must be secured before boarding begins. The aircraft has its own smell even before people arrive. There is fuel outside, metal and fabric inside, stale smoke tucked into upholstery, coffee warming somewhere near the galley, and that dry, conditioned air that seems designed to make lipstick, throats, and tempers crack at different speeds. You know the scent will change as soon as the cabin fills. Cologne, hairspray, damp coats, tobacco, chewing gum, leather bags, face powder, paper, whiskey, children's sweets, and nervous perspiration will all make their contributions, because a passenger cabin is democracy at the level of smell. Everyone brings something. The ashtrays are everywhere, small, shiny, practical, and ominously confident. Smoking is ordinary in much of this world, including aircraft cabins, and you know that by cruising altitude the air may soften into a blue-grey layer of shared habit. Passengers will smoke after takeoff, smoke after meals, smoke while reading, smoke while nervous, smoke while bored, and sometimes smoke in a way that suggests the cigarette has become a navigational instrument. You will carry trays through it, smile through it, breathe through it, and return home with hair and uniform quietly remembering it. Still, the cabin is also beautiful in its way. Seats are tidy. Curtains or window shades are neat. Overhead areas are checked. The galley is stocked. Cups, trays, napkins, meals, coffee, and service items wait in compact arrangements that suggest abundance has been folded by engineers. The public sees the meal when it appears. You see the storage, the latches, the counts, the narrow spaces, the tiny work surfaces, and the precise miracle of making hospitality fit inside compartments. You check the galley with the seriousness of a housewife opening cupboards before guests arrive. Except your guests are strangers, your dining room moves, and the silverware has to survive weather. Pillows and blankets must be counted and placed. Magazines must sit neatly. Seat belts must lie ready. Safety cards, if present, must be available without becoming interesting enough for passengers to read before they need them. You check oxygen, exits, lights, interphones, and emergency supplies, because beneath the fabric, smoke, coffee, and glamour is the stubborn fact that the aircraft is a machine. Every soft detail has a hard duty behind it. The cabin must comfort people while also being prepared to command them. That is partly your job too. You are softness with procedures. The pilots may be upfront with instruments, switches, weather reports, and voices that sound calm enough to sell insurance. Back here, you have the human weather. Fear, hunger, impatience, vanity, airsickness, children, flirtation, confusion, and the man who will inevitably board carrying a bag large enough to suggest he is relocating a piano. You look down the aisle and imagine the coming arrangement. First the early boarders, eager and awkward, then the business travellers, brisk and already dissatisfied with something theoretical. Then the families, carrying coats, toys, snacks, and the ancient parental hope that a child will be transformed by altitude into a philosopher. Then the nervous flyers who will watch your face as carefully as pilots watch instruments. You prepare for all of them. The seatbelts click when tested. The overhead bins or racks wait for arguments. The call buttons sit quietly, pretending innocence. The lavatories are checked, though later someone will treat them as both a mystery and a public inconvenience. You straighten a headrest cover, tuck a blanket, close a compartment, and feel the aircraft settle around you with a low mechanical hum. Outside, fuel trucks, baggage carts, ground crew, and terminal windows move in their own world. Inside, time narrows. Boarding is coming. The empty cabin is the last peaceful version of the flight, like a kitchen before relatives arrive, or a parlour before the committee sits down. You stand near the front, adjust your gloves, and breathe once more before the door opens. The cabin smells of coffee, metal, upholstery, cleaning fluid, and smoke waiting to become history. In a few minutes, passengers will call it glamorous. You will call it work with armrests. You stand at the aircraft door greeting passengers as if each one has personally improved the morning by arriving. The smile must be fresh for the businessman carrying too much luggage, the nervous first-time flyer clutching her handbag, the mother with a child already negotiating with gravity, the honeymoon couple glowing with private weather, and the man who has decided that the boarding doorway is the correct place to explain his seating preference in full. Behind you, the galley waits with coffee pots, trays, napkins, and the practical knowledge that hospitality begins before anyone has even sat down incorrectly. Boarding is the moment when air travel changes from elegant possibility into human inventory. The gate agent begins sending them forward, and the line approaches with coats, hats, tickets, purses, briefcases, camera cases, garment bags, flowers, children, newspapers, cigarettes, and the small tense dignity of people who suspect they have packed either too much or the wrong thing. You say good morning, welcome aboard, good afternoon, right this way. Yes, that is your seat. No, sir, the aisle must remain clear. And you say it all as though language has not been assigned to do heavy lifting before breakfast. Each passenger arrives with a story, but you receive the condensed version. A ticket, a face, a bag, a question, a smell of aftershave or powder, and sometimes an immediate complaint offered like a calling card. In the 1960s, flying still carries ceremony for many travelers. Some have dressed for it. Men wear suits and hats. Women arrive with gloves, careful hair, and handbags held as if they contain both lipstick and courage. Children are scrubbed into public behavior, which lasts until roughly the second row. Nervous passengers look at your face for reassurance, and you give it to them because that is part of the job. If you look calm, perhaps the aircraft is calm. If your lipstick has not fled, perhaps the engines also feel confident. You learn to read passengers quickly. The businessman who boards briskly may want his coat hung, his drink soon, and his importance handled gently. The elderly woman may need help with the step, the bag, the seatbelt, and the entire concept of leaving the earth in a chair. The honeymoon couple may smile at each other so completely that they forget overhead storage exists. The mother with the child may already be apologizing for a future disturbance that has not yet happened, though the child is making promising early movements. You soften your voice for her, because travel with children is a form of public examination and she is dressed for court. The passenger with too many bags believes the laws of space should be more generous because he bought a ticket. He looks at the overhead area, then at you, as if you personally designed the compartment to insult him. You explain politely, you rearrange, you lift when necessary though the bag is heavy enough to contain either shoes or a small anvil. You tuck coats, direct bodies, encourage movement, and keep the line from hardening into a traffic problem with hats. Boarding is a choreography of tiny corrections. Please move down the aisle. Please. Step aside. Please place that under the seat. Please watch your head. Please let the gentleman pass. Please do not stand in the doorway reflecting on the seat number, as if it were a moral question. You must be gracious, but boarding teaches you that graciousness is often logistics wearing lipstick. The doorway is also where passengers decide what you are. To some, you are a hostess. To some, a daughterly helper. To some, a pretty symbol of the airline. To some, a servant with wings. To the nervous, you are proof that professionals are present. To the difficult, you are the first available representative of everything wrong with the schedule, the weather, the seating chart, and possibly the nation. You greet them all with the same smooth face. This is not because you feel the same about them. It is because the aircraft cannot depart if every feeling receives a fair hearing. Behind your shoulder, another stewardess watches the cabin fill. She notes a passenger who may need help, a man who has already had a drink elsewhere, a child with ears likely to hurt during climb, a woman pale with fear, a coat blocking a row, a bag too large, a seat dispute beginning to sprout like an unwanted houseplant. You communicate with glances, small nods, movements so slight passengers miss them. The cabin becomes a map of coming needs. The gate agent hands over final papers. The pilots prepare up front. The ground crew moves below. You are still saying welcome, as if welcome were endless. At last the line thins. The final passenger arrives late, breathless, carrying guilt and blaming traffic. You smile because someone must. The door closes. The cabin settles into its first collective silence, broken immediately by someone asking whether there will be coffee. Boarding is complete, which means the flight has not begun, and yet somehow everyone already needs something. You push the meal cart down the aisle with the careful dignity of someone moving a small restaurant through a hallway full of knees. In the so-called golden age of air travel, meals may arrive on trays with real dishes, little rolls, salads, desserts, coffee cups, and enough ceremony to suggest that the airline has briefly mistaken a cabin for a dining club. But ceremony is heavy, trays slide, coffee threatens, passengers sleep exactly when they should choose an entree. The aisle is narrow, the aircraft moves, and your job is to make roast beef at altitude look natural. The meal service begins long before the first tray appears. In the galley, everything has been counted, heated, arranged, secured, checked, and worried over in miniature. Containers fit into compartments with the precision of a puzzle designed by someone who has never met turbulence personally. Rolls wait in their wrappers, salads sit in small dishes with chilled patience, desserts look cheerful in the way only airline desserts can, and the main dishes emerge warm enough to suggest hospitality without promising a home kitchen. The smells gather quickly. Coffee, meat, vegetables, warm bread, foil, plastic, cigarettes, perfume, and the faint metallic breath of the aircraft itself. It is not exactly a restaurant. It is not exactly a dining room. It is a moving tube in which several dozen people have been persuaded that dinner should happen politely on their laps. You brace the cart with your hip and begin. Would you prefer beef or chicken? Coffee or tea? Cream or sugar? Dressing with that? May I take your tray? The phrases repeat like a small domestic prayer, though the congregation has very little patience and several elbows. Passengers brighten when food arrives. Food gives people something to do besides monitor the wing. It turns nervous silence into chewing, conversation, and small judgments about whether the roll is warm enough to forgive the weather. Some passengers are delighted. They have dressed for the flight, received a tray, unfolded a napkin, and feel that the modern world is keeping its promises. Others inspect the plate as if the airline has personally challenged their standards. A businessman wants to know why his preferred entree has run out. A woman asks whether the sauce contains something she dislikes, though she cannot name the sauce and you did not cook it. A child wants dessert first, which is unreasonable but philosophically clear. You answer, replace, apologize, explain, and smile, all while keeping the cart from forming a new relationship with someone's knee. Meals in the air carry a peculiar glamour because they are unnecessary in the grand human sense and very necessary in the passenger sense. People could, in theory, survive a short flight without a full tray. But ceremony matters. A meal makes the ticket feel valuable. It says the airline has not merely transported you, but fed you at altitude with silverware, napkin, and enough tiny containers to make civilization seem organized. In earlier decades and on certain routes, airline meals can be elaborate, even elegant, with carved meats, china, flowers, or menus that make the cabin feel like a club. By the 1960s, service varies by airline, route, class, and aircraft, but the idea remains powerful. Flying should feel special, and special apparently requires someone in a fitted uniform to lean over 30 laps with gravy. You learn the physics of service quickly. Liquids move, trays tilt. Passengers open tray tables with surprise, as if the mechanism were invented that morning. Seat backs recline into your path, newspapers expand. A man falls asleep just as you need to ask a question, mouth slightly open, dignity checked with his luggage. Another passenger eats with intense seriousness, guarding the butter as if it were a strategic material. The aisle narrows whenever you enter it, which seems impossible, but is true. Your body learns to twist, reach, balance, bend, and withdraw without spilling, brushing, dropping, or revealing that your shoes have joined a union. Another stewardess works from the other end, and together you create a quiet rhythm of trays appearing, cups filling, wrappers opening, and plates being cleared before the cabin becomes a museum of used dishes. Between rows, you catch fragments of life. A couple speaking softly, a man reading while eating, a child licking dessert from a spoon, a nervous flyer taking comfort in the ordinary shape of a dinner roll. Food can make the sky feel lower. It gives the hands a task and the mind a small island. That is part of the beauty of it. It is also why the work must look easy. The passenger should not see the hurried galley, the hot containers, the careful counts, the aching wrists, the calculations of who still needs coffee and whose tray is sliding toward tragedy. The passenger sees the smile, the tray, the meal, the napkin, the fiction that everything has unfolded naturally. After service, you collect the evidence. Half-eaten rolls, folded napkins, sticky cups, tiny dessert dishes scraped clean, cigarette ash in places where ash had no business travelling. The cart returns heavier, with proof of hospitality. The cabin relaxes into digestion, smoke, conversation, and the soft clatter of a few remaining cups. You secure the galley again, wipe a surface, straighten your gloves, and understand that you have just served a dining room that moved hundreds of miles while nobody agreed on the sauce. You carry coffee through the cabin while the aircraft hums, the cups tremble, and every sleeve in the aisle seems determined to join the service. Coffee is not just coffee here. It is comfort, status, routine, and a small brown liquid capable of ruining a white glove, a passenger's lap, and your employment record in one elegant motion. The pot is warm in your hand. The cabin lights soften the chrome edges of the cart. Someone asks for cream. Someone asks for sugar. Someone asks whether a different kind exists, and the decade quietly pretends not to hear. You have poured coffee on the ground many times, but coffee in an aircraft has ambitions of its own. It feels the slightest dip, the smallest turn, the whisper of turbulence, and begins considering independence. The cup waits on the tray table, the passenger watches your hand, and you lower the pot with the calm of a jeweler setting a stone. A dark stream appears, neat and obedient for one blessed second, then trembles as the aircraft shifts beneath your feet. You stop at exactly the right moment, too little, and the passenger feels neglected, too much, and the cup becomes a lawsuit with steam. The smell rises warmly, cutting through tobacco, perfume, upholstery, and the dry cabin air. Coffee gives the cabin a household feeling, which is strange because nobody's household is usually pressurized and traveling over clouds. It says morning, office, kitchen, breakfast, conversation, routine. It reminds passengers that life on the ground continues somewhere, with cups that do not slide and tables that do not need to be folded from the seat in front. In the cabin, however, coffee is also performance. You offer it with cream and sugar, perhaps from little containers or packets, perhaps with a small ritual that makes everything feel more generous than the storage allowed. A businessman accepts black coffee and looks as if he has made a character statement. A woman asks for just a little cream, then a little more, then smiles apologetically, and you reassure her as if dairy negotiation is a normal part of flight. A nervous passenger takes coffee because refusing would feel like admitting fear. A sleepy man wakes only enough to say yes, then nearly forgets he has hands. You learn to judge each cup, each lap, each tray table, each tremor of air. The white glove is your enemy and your witness. It shows everything: coffee, ink, ash, lipstick, grease, and the general truth that public elegance is mostly stain management. One careless splash can leave a mark that seems to announce itself to the entire cabin. You may carry spare gloves, but changing them is not always simple in the middle of service, and the stained one seems to sit on your hand with theatrical shame. Coffee also reveals passenger character. Some are grateful. Some lift the cup toward you with a nod, as if accepting a small treaty. Some complain that it is too hot, too cool, too strong, too weak, too late, too early, or insufficiently similar to coffee made by a wife several states away. A man may ask whether you made it yourself, and you may smile because explaining airline catering, galley heating, and corporate supply chains would take longer than his attention span deserves. Another asks for a refill before you have finished pouring the first round, displaying the confidence of a person who thinks the pot is connected to a well. You learn the geography of refills. Businessmen need them. Nervous flyers request them and then hold the cups without drinking. Mothers want them but cannot reach them because a child has occupied the tray table with crackers, toys, and a small empire of crumbs. Older passengers sip slowly, holding the cup with care. Pilots may want coffee too, carried forward with a different kind of caution, because the cockpit feels like a separate little office where weather, instruments, and command live behind a door. You carry it steadily, you pass it carefully, you do not imagine dropping it near anything important. The decade has not yet developed the language of workplace hazards in the way later people will, but your hands know. Hot liquids in motion are not decorative. They are a test of balance, attention, and whether the aircraft has decided to develop a sense of humor. Sometimes the captain turns on the sign, Sometimes the air grows rough. Then service pauses, cups are collected or secured, and the coffee pot returns to the galley with the offended dignity of a performer removed mid-song. Passengers may sigh, but turbulence outranks appetite. When the air smooths, the ritual resumes. Cup by cup, row by row, you restore ordinary life at altitude. That is the secret power of coffee service. It is small, repetitive, and domestic, but it tells passengers the flight is manageable. If coffee can be poured, perhaps everything is under control. If cream can be passed, perhaps the sky is behaving. You know better, of course. You know control is partly training, partly weather, partly machinery, and partly a woman in a uniform walking carefully with a hot pot while everyone assumes grace is natural. At the end, you return to the galley, set the pot down, flex your fingers, and inspect the glove. One small stain near the thumb. Not disaster, not clean. In aviation, as in life, coffee has made its report. You hear the chime and turn with the prepared expression of a woman who has decided not to take electricity personally. The call button is meant for service, assistance, and genuine needs, but in practice it can become a passenger's private telegraph line to your patients. A man wants another drink. A woman wants a pillow. Someone wants to know why the plane is late, as if you have been keeping the weather in your handbag. The cabin is warm, smoky, softly lit, and full of people who have discovered that pressing a small button makes a woman appear. At first, the button seems innocent. It is small, practical, tucked near the passenger's reach, a useful little device for summoning help when someone is ill, frightened, confused, stuck, thirsty, cold, or unable to understand the seatbelt. In theory, it is a piece of safety and service equipment. In practice, it is also a tiny throne. Some passengers press it with hesitation, almost apologetically, as if afraid of disturbing the machinery of flight. Others press it with the clean confidence of someone ringing for a maid in a house he does not own. The chime sounds overhead, and a light appears, identifying the row with the accuracy of a courtroom witness. You look up, locate it, smooth your face, and move down the aisle. May I help you? The phrase is simple. It must cover nearly everything. A request for water, a question about landing time, a complaint about the seat, a plea for air sickness assistance, a demand for another blanket, a report that a child has dropped a toy into a region of the floor no adult wishes to visit, a man who wants to know whether he may smoke now, although the sign has answered him in glowing letters, a passenger who believes you can explain a delay better than the captain, the weather office, the mechanics, and possibly the laws of motion. You learn that the call button reveals not only needs but assumptions. It tells you who believes service is mutual courtesy and who believes service means appearing instantly with no visible human process. It tells you who has flown before, who is nervous, who is lonely, who is bored, who wants attention, and who has mistaken the cabin for a hotel lobby that happens to be moving very quickly above weather. The button can be useful. A frightened passenger may press it because she feels faint and does not want to make a scene. An elderly traveller may need help with a belt or medication. A parent may need water for a child. A passenger may notice smoke, illness, a spill, or something that genuinely requires you. For those moments, you are grateful the button exists. It is the unnecessary summons that trains your eyelid not to twitch. You may be clearing meal trays when it rings. You may be securing the galley. You may be helping a sick passenger. You may be answering another call button when a second one lights up, proving that electricity, like society, can become ambitious. The sound enters your nervous system. Chime, smile, move. Ask, solve, return, chime, smile, move again. You become a calm little pendulum in heels. A passenger who has just watched you pass 3 times may press the button rather than lift a hand or wait, because the button gives his desire a formality it has not earned. He wants a magazine from the rack. He wants a light adjusted. He wants to know if the seat beside him will remain empty, as if you can negotiate with fate and ticketing at once. He wants another drink, though his current drink still has its hat on. You answer with practiced warmth, because a stewardess must never imply that a request is silly unless it has become actively dangerous, and even then the implication should arrive wearing gloves. Sometimes the button creates a small moral puzzle. If you answer too quickly, you train the cabin to expect miracles. If you delay, The passenger may feel ignored and press again with the injured dignity of a monarch whose bell rope has failed. If you explain that you will return, he may press again to confirm the arrangement, apparently trusting electricity more than speech. Children discover the button with dangerous wonder. Their eyes widen. Their fingers rise. A mother whispers no with the urgency of someone preventing international trouble. If the child succeeds, the light appears, the chime sounds, and you arrive to find a family frozen in guilt while a small person looks delighted by cause and effect. You smile kindly, because childhood is already difficult without being arrested by cabin crew. You explain gently that the button is for help. The child nods and stores this important knowledge for possible misuse later. By the end of the flight, you may know certain rows by sound alone. Some rows want attention, some want reassurance. One child has found power. You answer them all because that is the work. But you also learn the quiet art of not letting the button own you. You keep your pace, you keep priorities. You know when service can wait and when help cannot. The chime sounds again, bright and small in the smoky cabin. You look up. Another light. Another need. Another person has discovered that in the modern age, pressing one finger can make a woman cross the sky. You lean slightly into the aisle to answer a question and recognize, before the sentence is finished, that the passenger is not really asking about the arrival time. He is testing the border between service and flirtation, between friendliness and entitlement, between a uniform and a woman inside it. In the 1960s cabin, the stewardess is marketed as glamorous, youthful, attentive, and charming, which some men interpret with the confidence of people who have never had to remain professional while trapped between seat rows. You smile carefully, answer briefly, and move on, carrying dignity like a tray that must not spill. The moment begins lightly, as these moments often do. A compliment about the uniform, a joke about how lucky the pilot must be, a question about whether you ever get lonely in all those hotels, a hand lingering too close to yours when you pass a cup, a passenger leaning into the aisle so you must angle around him, forcing your body to become part of a conversation you did not agree to attend. None of it, taken alone, is easy to name in the language available to you. It may be called harmless, friendly, gallant, boys being boys, although the boys in question are grown men with expense accounts and wedding rings. The airline has helped create the problem by selling stewardesses as symbols of charm, adventure, and feminine availability, polishing the image until some passengers mistake professional warmth for personal invitation. Advertisements may smile. The aisle receives the consequences. You learn to protect yourself without seeming defensive, which is a difficult art and an unfair one. You step back just enough. You keep your hands occupied. You answer the question asked, not the invitation hidden inside it. You use "sir" like a small fence. You glance toward another passenger, another row, another task, giving yourself an exit made of duty. If another stewardess is nearby, she may understand at once. Women in service learn a silent language of rescue. A sudden need in the galley, a request from the other side, a tray that must be collected, a presence that says, "Without words, I see him too." The cabin looks public, but many moments inside it are strangely private. The engine noise lowers voices, the rows are close. A man can say something softly and still leave you responsible for responding pleasantly. If you object too strongly, he may complain. If you smile too much, he may continue. If you ignore him, he may press the call button and become official. The rules ask you to be charming but not encouraging, friendly but not familiar, feminine but not flirtatious, unless the passenger believes flirtation was his idea, firm but not cold, professional but never severe enough to disturb the airline's preferred atmosphere. It is a needle threaded through smoke. You are not alone in this. Waitresses, secretaries, salesgirls, nurses, receptionists, and countless women in public-facing jobs know the same narrow corridor. The difference is that your corridor is literal, airborne, and difficult to leave. The passenger may be important, or may believe he is. He may be traveling first class, where confidence sometimes reclines before the body does. He may be drinking. He may be bored. He may be lonely. He may simply have absorbed a world in which a woman paid to be pleasant is treated as public property with lipstick. You learn not to accept his version of the scene. His attention may flatter the advertisement, but it complicates the work. You still have safety checks, meal service, turbulence, sick passengers, nervous flyers, and the full domestic weather of the cabin to manage. His little performance takes time from all of it. The insult is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is the constant small demand that you make a man feel charming while he makes your job harder. You keep moving. Movement is protection. A stationary stewardess can be cornered by conversation, but a moving one belongs to the flight. You lean away, straighten a seat pocket, collect a cup, answer another passenger, and let the aisle carry you forward. Your smile remains, though it has changed temperature. To the untrained eye, it is the same smile. To another stewardess, it may say several paragraphs. There are moments when the passenger becomes frightening, and then the calculation changes. You may inform another crew member, speak with the purser or senior stewardess, alert the cockpit if needed, reseat someone when possible, or use the collective authority of the crew to make the cabin safer. But many encounters remain in the grey zone where the behaviour is unpleasant enough to matter and ordinary enough that the decade shrugs. You file it somewhere inside, beside sore feet, smoke, and the memory of every time someone called you sweetheart while asking for professional service. Later, in the galley, you may tell the story with dry precision. The others laugh softly, not because it is funny exactly, but because laughter is sometimes how women put a lid on a pot that keeps boiling. You may imitate his tone, you may give him a nickname, you may agree to watch his row for each other. Then the curtain opens and you return to the cabin as if nothing has happened. Because the flight continues and so must the fiction that service is effortless. You pass his row again. He smiles. You smile back with the polished calm of a door that has locked itself from the inside. You check the exits, oxygen equipment, life vests, flashlights, galley latches, and emergency procedures with a seriousness that the advertisements rarely place in the foreground. The public may admire the uniform, the smile, the legs, the little hat, and the way you pour coffee without complaint. But beneath the polished surface is training built for fire, water, panic, illness, turbulence, decompression, evacuation, and the ancient passenger instinct to grab luggage during danger. The cabin may look like a flying cocktail lounge, but you know where the equipment is. Glamour is nice, knowing how to open the door matters more. Before boarding, while the empty seats still sit in neat rows and the cabin has not yet become a social experiment with hats, you move through the aircraft with quiet purpose. You touch what must be checked. You look where passengers will not look. You confirm that the equipment is present, secured, accessible, and ready to become important with very little notice. There is a strange intimacy in knowing the hidden bones of the cabin. Passengers know the tray table, the window shade, the ashtray, the seat pocket, the call button, and the armrest they will defend from a stranger with surprising moral force. You know the exits, the handle covers, the escape path, the jump seat, the interphone, the oxygen masks, the medical kit, the fire extinguisher, the raft or flotation equipment if the route requires it, the lights, the galley locks, and all the small practical details that stand between order and a very bad afternoon. In training, these procedures were repeated until they entered the body. Check, secure, count, demonstrate, command, assist, repeat. The public version of the stewardess is soft, polished, decorative, and attentive. The working version is also counting doors, judging passenger conditions, noticing loose bags, fastening latches, and thinking about how quickly human beings can become astonished when told to leave possessions behind. You understand why the rule exists. In ordinary life, people love their belongings. In danger, they may love them with the intensity of a tragic opera. A suitcase becomes identity, a handbag becomes inheritance, a briefcase becomes national policy. You may one day have to tell a man that no, his luggage cannot accompany him down the emergency slide, and you may have to say it with the voice of authority that appears suddenly from beneath the pretty hat. This is the part advertisements tend to ignore. They show you smiling with coffee, arranging pillows, bending gracefully beside a passenger, or pointing toward distant cities on a map. They do not linger on the training that teaches you to shout commands, fight smoke, help the injured, open a heavy door correctly, or keep a cabin moving when fear has made everyone forget they possess legs. Yet safety is not separate from service. It is the serious heart inside the polite shell. When you offer a blanket to a nervous woman, you are also noting whether she may need help during landing. When you smile at the man in the aisle seat, you are also observing whether he seems steady enough to sit near an exit. When you ask passengers to fasten belts, you are not making a decorative suggestion. You are trying to keep them from becoming airborne inside the aircraft, which is never the kind of flying anyone has purchased. Illness adds another quiet layer. Someone may faint from nerves, drink too much, become airsick, struggle with breathing, panic, or clutch your hand in a way that turns you, briefly, into every nurse, daughter, sister, and authority figure he can imagine. You may have limited supplies, limited space, and a cabin full of witnesses. You learn to make a folded cloth, a cup of water, a calm voice, and a careful report feel like a plan. Sometimes that is all a plan can be until landing. You also know that not every danger arrives dramatically. A galley latch left unsecured can turn an ordinary cart into a missile with coffee service credentials. A loose bag can fall. A cigarette handled carelessly can threaten upholstery, clothing, or nerves. A passenger standing at the wrong time can become part of turbulence in a way he did not intend. Safety is often the art of preventing objects and people from expressing themselves too freely. So you check, latch, fasten, count, and check again. The work is quiet enough to be invisible when done well, which is the usual reward for competence. The passengers board and see calm. They see lipstick, uniform, warm lights, magazines, pillows, and perhaps a dinner tray waiting somewhere in the galley. They do not see the mental map you carry of every exit and emergency action. That is all right. They are not meant to see it unless the day becomes unkind. And what plane on? Still, when the aircraft door closes and the cabin becomes sealed into its own small weather, you feel the seriousness settle under the ceremony. You smile, because smiling is part of the job, but behind the smile is a list, and behind the list is the door, and behind the door is the simple fact that glamour is lovely until someone needs the handle. You feel the aircraft dip, and watch the cabin's polite arrangement become a physics lesson with upholstery. Coffee trembles, cigarette smoke swirls, ice cubes shift, and passengers look up with the sudden expression of people remembering that flight is not a room but an agreement with air. Your own stomach may notice the drop, but your face must not. You steady the cart, brace your knees, reassure the nervous, check the seated, and pretend that the tray in your hand has not briefly considered independence. The aircraft bumps again, and everyone waits for you to decide how worried they are allowed to be. Turbulence has a way of exposing every fiction in the cabin. A moment ago, passengers were dining, reading, smoking, adjusting pillows, criticizing the coffee, and behaving as if the aircraft were a private parlor with clouds arranged outside for decoration. Then the air shifts, the floor moves under the feet, and the cabin remembers that it is not a room at all. It is a machine crossing invisible rivers. The change may be small, only a shiver through the fuselage, a lift, a dip, the sudden clink of cups. Or it may be sharper, enough to draw a little collective breath from the rows, enough to make a man grip both armrests after spending the first half of the flight implying fear was for other people. You do not mock him. Fear in flight is democratic. It visits first class and economy with equal manners. It also visits you, though your training requires that it find no chair. You glance toward the seatbelt sign, toward the cart, toward the nearest passengers. If service must stop, it stops. Coffee can wait. A tray can wait. A complaint can wait with unusual dignity. Because turbulence has outranked it, you speak calmly. We are going to pause service for a few moments. Please return to your seats. Please fasten your seatbelts. You say it as if the air has made only a modest request. Your tone matters. Too casual, and people may ignore you. Too alarmed, and the cabin begins writing its own tragedy. The stewardess voice finds the narrow road between honesty and sedative. You do not say everything is perfectly fine if it is not. You say what is useful. Fasten the belt, put the cigarette out if required. Set the cup down. Hold the armrest. Keep the aisle clear. You steady yourself with one hand on a seat back, moving carefully, feeling the aircraft through your shoes. The aisle seems longer during turbulence, as if the plane has stretched itself in sympathy. The cart is secured or held, depending on the moment. A cart in motion is a stern object with no respect for human shins. You learn early that anything not latched down has opinions. Cups hop, ice rattles, a purse slides, a magazine slaps the floor, a passenger's hat moves with the expression of something reconsidering loyalty. The smoke in the cabin swirls strangely, drawing visible patterns in the air, and for a second the whole aircraft looks like a drawing of uncertainty. Passengers look to you. That is one of the unnerving honors of the job. They may not listen to safety announcements, but during a bump, they study your face as if it were an instrument panel with lipstick. If you smile, they borrow it. If you walk steadily, they become steadier. If you pause, they pause internally too. The responsibility is quiet and immediate. A child begins to cry, startled more than hurt. You lower your voice, tell the mother it is all right, and perhaps offer a small explanation about rough air, because children appreciate information if it arrives gently and does not sound like weather has become personal. A nervous woman asks whether this is normal. You say yes, this can happen, and the sentence carries more weight than its words. A businessman makes a joke too loudly to prove he is not afraid. Another man closes his eyes in negotiations with every faith, philosophy, and mechanical principle he has ever trusted. You continue moving as needed. Not too fast, not too slow. Calm has a pace. The pilots may speak over the public address system, their voices level, naming the rough air and asking passengers to remain seated. The announcement helps, but passengers still watch you. The cockpit controls the aircraft. The cabin controls the mood. You are part of that control, along with seatbelts, locked carts, latched compartments, and the collective decision not to panic over a spilled drink. After a few minutes, or perhaps longer if the air is feeling theatrical, the motion eases. The aircraft settles. Cups stop trembling. Shoulders drop. Conversation returns in small pieces. Someone laughs softly, embarrassed by his own grip on the armrest. Someone asks for another coffee, because the human spirit is resilient and poorly timed. You resume service when safe, collecting shifted trays, wiping spills, reassuring people who wish to pretend they were never worried. The cabin returns to its parlor illusion. Newspapers rise again. Cigarettes glow. Cups are refilled. But you know the truth has shown itself briefly. The sky is not a dining room. The aisle is not a carpeted hallway. And every tray is loyal only until the air begins asking questions. You unlock a hotel room in a city you may barely see, set down your crew bag, remove your hat, and discover that the glamorous life has a remarkable amount of sitting alone on bedspreads. The room smells of starch, carpet, radiator heat, furniture polish, and someone else's cigarettes. Outside the window, neon glows, taxis pass, and the city promises excitement with the confidence of a postcard. But your feet hurt, your uniform needs hanging, your alarm is already a threat, and tomorrow's flight begins before any reasonable sightseeing has introduced itself. Travel is freedom, yes, but sometimes freedom is a tiny bottle of shampoo and a wake-up call. You close the door behind you and listen to the hotel room settle into its temporary silence. There is a bed with a coverlet tucked too tightly, a small desk with stationery bearing the hotel name, a lamp with a shade that has seen many tired women, heavy curtains, a bathroom with wrapped soap, and a telephone that looks important enough to deliver either romance or a schedule change. The room is yours, but only in the shallow way rented rooms belong to travelers. You may open drawers, but you will not fill them. You may hang the uniform, but only so it can leave again. You may look out at the city, but the city is already aware you have an early call. This is one of the central jokes of the job. Everyone imagines you seeing the world. Often you see the airport, the crew bus, the hotel lobby, the inside of an elevator, a restaurant close enough for tired feet, and the ceiling above a bed where sleep refuses to arrive on command. Still, the city glows outside like a promise. New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, Los Angeles, London, Rome, Paris. Or a smaller city whose glamour consists mainly of a diner that stays open late. Each place has streets, theatres, shops, music, weather, and people living actual lives. While you are mostly trying to steam a wrinkle out of a skirt, sometimes you do go out. You and another stewardess may walk to dinner, wearing coats over uniforms or changing into a dress if time and energy have reached a fragile agreement. You may see a few blocks, a restaurant, a hotel bar, a postcard rack, a theatre sign, a river, a skyline, or the inside of a taxi driven by a man who knows the city better than your schedule allows. On better layovers, there is laughter, sightseeing, shopping, dancing, letters written home, photographs taken, and the real thrill of being young in a place you had once only seen in magazines. Those moments matter. They are part of why women wanted the job and why they stayed despite the rules. The world does open. It just opens between flights, in shoes that have betrayed you. On shorter layovers, glamour becomes more practical. You remove your hat carefully, because a crushed hat can cause more trouble tomorrow than an unexamined emotion tonight. You hang the jacket, smooth the skirt, inspect the stockings, set out makeup, check the alarm, confirm the wake-up call, and calculate how many hours remain before you must look fresh again. The arithmetic can be discouraging. If you sleep now, you can get enough rest, provided the hallway stays quiet, the radiator stops rehearsing, the telephone does not ring, the city outside does not sound interesting, and your mind does not begin replaying every passenger from the day. Naturally, the mind begins. You remember the nervous woman in row 9, the man who asked too many questions, the child who smiled at landing, the coffee stain near your thumb, the captain's announcement, the way the cabin went quiet during turbulence. Work follows you into the room, lightly but persistently, like cigarette smoke in the lining of a coat. You may call home from the hotel telephone or write a letter on stationery, selecting the parts of the day that will sound glamorous without causing concern. You do not mention the ache in your calves first. You do not mention the loneliness too heavily, because loneliness can worry mothers more than weather. You say the hotel is nice. You say the city is lovely. You say the job is interesting, which is true in the way a suitcase can be both useful and heavy. Other crew members are nearby, perhaps down the hall, perhaps already asleep, perhaps meeting in someone's room to talk softly, laugh, compare stories, share cold cream, mend a hem, or eat something from a paper bag because dinner hours and flight schedules have never been properly introduced. There is companionship, but it is temporary too. Everyone belongs to the timetable. The room becomes a little station between selves, public stewardess and private woman, hat pinned and hair unpinned, voice polished and voice tired, city outside, an alarm clock beside the bed. You wash your face, hang your stockings, set your shoes where you will not trip over them in the morning, and turn down the blanket. The bedspread is not home, but it is horizontal, and tonight that is a persuasive argument. Outside, neon flickers. A taxi sighs at the curb. Somewhere, music and laughter move without you. You switch off the lamp, already scheduled to become elegant again before breakfast, and let the strange luxury of travel reduce itself to one small dark room where nobody is asking for coffee. You come home to an apartment shared with other young women who also own too many uniforms, too little sleep, and at least one story involving a passenger who believed charm was a medical emergency. The air smells of hairspray, coffee, stockings drying over a chair, inexpensive perfume, and toast made at odd hours by someone whose body clock has surrendered. Crew schedules scatter everyone through mornings, midnights, holidays, and weather delays. The apartment is not quite home and not quite hotel. It is a waiting room with rent, where women compare routes, swap advice, mend hems, and laugh softly before collapsing into bed. The door opens onto a little world organized around irregular time. One roommate may be asleep at noon behind a closed door with a note asking for mercy. Another may be leaving at dawn, fastening earrings while chewing toast and searching for a glove that has chosen independence. Someone's suitcase sits half-packed in the hallway. Someone else's hat rests upside down on the table like a small defeated boat. The kitchen contains coffee, bread, fruit if anyone has been responsible, and the faint evidence of meals eaten at hours no cookbook would recognize. The refrigerator holds leftovers, milk, perhaps a slice of pie, and a collection of labels and warnings understood only by women who have learned that sharing space requires diplomacy. You move quietly when others sleep, and they move quietly when you sleep, at least in theory. In practice, keys jingle, floorboards creak, telephones ring, alarm clocks attack, and someone whispers loudly because whispering, like flying, is harder than it looks. Shared stewardess apartments are often practical. The job may require living near a base city far from family. Rent is easier with roommates. So is loneliness. You can borrow stockings, trade shifts of courage, share cold cream, split a taxi, and return after a long flight to people who understand why your smile hurts. They know the weight of the crew bag, the sting of a supervisor's glance, the comedy of hotel wake-up calls, the smell of smoke in hair, and the unique sorrow of dropping a fresh pair of stockings while late. They know that a man pressing the call button for the 5th time may not be a tragedy, but it can still become a full emotional weather system by landing. The apartment becomes a place where the official voice can come off. In the cabin, you say certainly, of course, yes sir, right away. At home, you may say what you actually meant, though preferably not while someone is trying to sleep before a morning flight. Stories collect around the table. A passenger who wanted steak after boarding a short domestic hop. A nervous flyer who gripped your hand so tightly your ring finger remembered him for 2 days. A child who called the airplane a bus with clouds. A businessman who explained aviation to you while failing to understand his seatbelt. These stories are told with precision, affection, irritation, and the calm expertise of women who have turned absurdity into a household language. There is laughter, but it is often low. The walls are thin. The neighbours may already think stewardesses live dramatic lives involving pilots, cocktails, and unsuitable hours. The truth is more practical. There are laundry schedules, stockings to rinse, shoes to polish, uniforms to hang, hair to set, bills to pay, letters to answer, groceries to buy, sleep to chase. The apartment may contain glamour in pieces, scarves over chair backs, lipstick on the sink, perfume bottles, airline magazines, postcards from layovers, matchbooks from hotel restaurants, and photographs of smiling women in uniforms standing together as if none of them has ever had to scrub coffee from a cuff. But it also contains ordinary life, a clogged sink, a cold cup of coffee, a landlord, a telephone bill, one good frying pan, and a sofa that has heard several confessions. You may decorate with what you can afford, perhaps bright curtains, a second-hand table, a little radio, framed postcards, a lamp that flatters everyone after midnight. The apartment is modern in spirit, if not always in furniture. It is a space where young working women live outside the immediate supervision of family, which can be thrilling, practical, and occasionally discussed by relatives with expressions of careful concern. People may admire your independence while privately wondering whether women living together near an airport are getting ideas. They are, of course. Ideas about money, travel, work, unfair rules, sore feet, delayed flights, better shoes, and whether life might contain more choices than the old script allowed. Yet the apartment is not rebellion every evening. Sometimes it is just 3 tired women eating toast in slips and curlers, too sleepy to be symbolic. Holidays are strange here. Someone is always away. Christmas decorations may stay up too long because schedules interfere with sentiment. Birthdays are celebrated between trips, with cake from a bakery and candles found in a drawer. Romance arrives by telephone, letter, or a man waiting downstairs in a car, and it must negotiate with roommates, uniforms, and departure times. At night, when all of you are home, the place feels almost full enough to be family. Shoes line the wall, the radio hums, someone irons, someone reads, someone falls asleep with rollers in. Tomorrow, you will scatter again into airports and weather. Tonight, the apartment holds you briefly, a little boarding lounge for women whose real address is partly written on schedules. You call home from a payphone or write a letter on hotel stationery, trying to explain that the job is wonderful, exhausting, glamorous, lonely, thrilling, ordinary, and sometimes mostly coffee. Your family imagines you stepping through Rome, New York, San Francisco, Honolulu, or London in perfect lipstick, being admired by handsome pilots and grateful passengers. You do not mention the sore feet first. You do not mention the weigh-ins, the smoke, the men who stare too long, or the way holidays can happen while you are somewhere between terminals. Instead, you say the city is lovely because worry travels badly by telephone. The call begins with cheerful voices and the small delay of distance. Your mother asks if you are eating properly. Your father asks about the airplane in a way that suggests he has either great confidence in machinery or no desire to admit fear. A younger sibling wants to know if you have met anyone famous. An aunt, if she is present, may ask whether the pilots are nice with the tone of someone arranging a wedding from several states away. You smile into the receiver, though nobody can see you, because the stewardess voice has become polite even when off-duty. You describe the hotel lobby, the city lights, the airport, the passengers, the meal service, the view above the clouds. You choose details that sparkle. You say the skyline was beautiful at dusk. You say the ocean looked silver. You say the captain was kind, the crew was pleasant, the route was busy, the passengers were mostly fine, which is a phrase large enough to hide several crimes against patience. Family hears the wonder because wonder is easier to send home. They picture you in motion, sleek and admired, carrying a small bag through glamorous terminals, eating in restaurants, sleeping in crisp hotels, collecting cities like charms on a bracelet. In fairness, some of that is true. You have seen dawn from above cloud banks. You have watched mountains rise in pink light. You have crossed distances that once took days and arrived before your body understood the journey. You have walked through airports with your name attached to a schedule and your wages in your own purse. That is not nothing. For a young woman from a smaller town or a modest household, the job can feel like a door that opens onto the world and lets you pass through in gloves. The myth has a foundation. It is just missing the blisters. You do not tell everything because every family has its own capacity for truth. If you describe the weigh-ins too plainly, your mother may become angry or worried. If you explain the marriage rules, someone may say perhaps it is just as well, dear, while misunderstanding the insult. If you mention the passenger who would not stop leaning into the aisle, your father may go silent in a way that helps no one. If you say you spent a holiday in a hotel room eating a sandwich near the radiator, someone may feel guilty for your independence, as if freedom should have included better catering. So you edit. Editing becomes a kindness, or a habit, or both. You say you are tired, but not too tired. You say the work is interesting, but not that interesting. Has sat on your chest at midnight in a strange city. You say you have friends, which is true. You do not say everyone is always leaving on a different flight. You say the city is lovely, though you saw it mainly from a taxi window. You say the passengers were amusing, which is also true if amusement is defined with enough distance. Letters are even more selective. On hotel stationery, with the pen scratching softly against the paper, you can arrange the job into paragraphs. Dear Mother and Dad, arrived safely, weather clear, hotel comfortable, saw a little of the city, flying again tomorrow. The words look calm because ink has excellent posture. You may add a postcard, perhaps of a monument, a skyline, a beach, or an airport terminal shining under a blue sky that did not include your delay. Back home, the postcard may sit on a mantel or refrigerator, proof that you are living a life worth describing. Our girl is a stewardess. She was in San Francisco last week. She goes everywhere. Everywhere sounds clean and large when spoken in a kitchen. It does not include the middle seat where someone spilled coffee, the hotel hallway at midnight, the scale, the smoke, the lonely dinner, or the way time zones make breakfast feel like an accusation. Still, you are proud. You want them to be proud too. You want your family to see the adventure without worrying over every rule and bruise. You want them to know you are capable, not merely pretty in a uniform. A neighbor may say you must be having the time of your life, and you may answer yes because the sentence is not entirely false and because canned peaches are not the place for labor policy. When the call ends, you place the receiver back or fold the letter, and the room becomes quiet again. The city outside remains distant. Your shoes wait by the bed. Your uniform hangs with tomorrow already inside it. Home thinks you are always in Paris. You are actually in a hotel room, deciding whether there is enough time to wash your stockings before sleep. You learn, perhaps slowly and perhaps with the sharpness of seeing who is missing, that the glamour of the stewardess was never offered equally. Airlines often sold a polished image shaped by race, gender, age, beauty, and class assumptions, and many women were filtered out before their names reached a schedule. Black women, Asian American women, Latina women, immigrant women, older women, married women, mothers, and women who did not match the preferred corporate image faced barriers that were not softened by the word glamour. The terminal may shine, but some doors open more easily than others, and the sky has never been as neutral as it looks from the ground. You notice it first as an absence, which is one of the quietest ways a system introduces itself. The posters show smiling women in crisp uniforms, bright skies, and the promise of modern travel. But the faces are often selected to reassure a particular public imagination. The airline does not have to say every rule aloud when the advertisement has already whispered the preferred answer. A young woman reading a hiring notice may see the height requirements, the weight range, the age limits, the unmarried status, the education expectations, the grooming standards, and the polite phrase about pleasing appearance, and understand that the door is narrower than the picture suggests. For some women, the barrier is written plainly. For others, it waits in the interview room, in the supervisor's glance, in the local custom that knows how to reject without becoming too specific. The job is advertised as freedom, but freedom has a front desk, and the front desk has opinions. You may work beside women who came from college, secretarial schools, small towns, suburbs, farms, military families, or city apartments, yet even that variety is shaped by who was allowed to apply, who could afford to travel for an interview, who had the right look, who had the right accent, who seemed suitable to represent the company's idea of elegance, and who would make certain passengers comfortable. Comfortable is a soft word with sharp furniture inside it. It can mean safe, familiar, attractive, respectable, and not challenging anyone's prejudices before the coffee service. Black women in particular faced powerful barriers in an industry selling a white, polished vision of airborne femininity. Even as the wider civil rights movement challenged segregated workplaces, public accommodations, and discriminatory hiring, some women did break through, often at personal cost, and their presence mattered greatly. But a first does not mean the door has swung open for everyone. Sometimes a first is one woman standing in a hallway while the building pretends the hallway is progress. Latina, Asian American, Native, immigrant, and other women of color faced different combinations of prejudice, invisibility, language assumptions, appearance expectations, and class barriers depending on the airline, the city, the route, and the era. A woman could be highly capable and still be told, directly or indirectly, that capability was not the image the company had ordered. You see the unfairness not only in race, but in class. The job requires a polished presentation before it pays you to maintain one. A woman needs the clothes to interview, the grooming tools, the confidence, the time, the travel money, the dental care, the social ease, the accent considered acceptable, and the ability to pass through rooms where people have been trained to recognize their own kind of respectability. The airline may speak of charm as though charm floats naturally from the soul, but charm often arrives wearing good shoes. A working-class girl may have everything needed to calm a cabin except the finishing school polish someone has mistaken for merit. A woman with a regional accent may be considered less suitable for the company voice. A married woman or mother may be treated as already occupied, as though a woman who has kept a household running could not possibly manage a tray table. A woman over the preferred age may be considered too old for a fantasy and too experienced for the people who invented it. You feel the contradiction every time the aircraft lifts. Up here, everyone depends on the same air. Passengers from different cities, classes, races, ages, and tempers sit in rows, sharing engine noise, smoke, meal trays, and fear when the aircraft dips. Yet the workforce has been filtered before it reaches the aisle. The sky looks wide from the window, but hiring can make it very small. You may not have the language for all of it yet, or you may have more language than the airline wishes to hear. You may only feel the shape of it in who stands beside you, who does not, whose application never becomes a uniform, whose talent disappears before boarding. That knowledge changes the shine of the terminal. It does not erase the glamour, but it places a shadow under it, the kind cast by a door that opens just wide enough for some women to be told they were lucky. You hear talk in crew rooms, union meetings, newspaper columns, and quiet conversations that some rules may not survive forever. The 1960s are not only a decade of bright uniforms and jet-age advertising, they are also a decade of lawsuits, civil rights arguments, workplace challenges, and women beginning to ask why youth, weight, marriage, race, and appearance have been treated as qualifications for pouring coffee near emergency exits. Change does not arrive like a clean landing. It circles, delays, argues with management, fills out paperwork, and makes everyone uncomfortable before the seatbelt sign finally turns off. At first, the talk may sound like rumor, because rumor is often how a new future enters a workplace before the official memo has found the courage. Someone has heard of a woman challenging a marriage rule. Someone else says an age limit is being questioned. A union representative mentions discrimination with the steady voice of a person who knows the word has to survive a room full of men pretending not to understand it. A newspaper clipping appears in a crew room, folded beside coffee cups and cigarette ash, reporting that women are asking why an airline can hire them for charm and dismiss them for becoming wives. A supervisor says the matter is complicated, which is one of the ways institutions ask unfairness to sit quietly while they look for a better chair. You keep working, because history rarely pauses the beverage service while it rearranges itself. The old rules are still present, the scale is still present, the age expectations are still present. The assumptions about race, femininity, respectability, and passenger comfort are still present, dressed nicely and holding paperwork. But something has begun to tremble under them. The civil rights movement has changed the moral weather of the country, even in places that would prefer weather remain outside. Federal protections, court challenges, commissions, unions, and determined individuals begin pressing against employment practices that once hid behind custom. At the same time, women in many workplaces are questioning rules that treat their bodies and private lives as company property. The stewardess job becomes a particularly visible battlefield because the contradictions are polished so brightly. Airlines praise stewardesses as modern, capable, worldly women, then maintain rules that suggest the company cannot survive a married employee, a birthday, a few pounds, or a face that does not match the advertisement. It is difficult to keep calling something modern when the rulebook behaves like a chaperone with a typewriter. You may not think of yourself as part of a movement every day. Most days, you are thinking about stockings, weather delays, coffee, passengers, rent, fatigue, and whether the hotel wake-up call will remember you. Movements are large. Work is specific, but the large thing touches the specific thing. It touches the form you filled out. It touches the scale. It touches the question about marriage. It touches the hiring photograph, the grooming inspection, the passenger who believes your smile proves agreement, the way a black applicant is treated, the way an older woman's competence is weighed against an image. It touches the little hat, though the hat is doing its best not to become political. In the crew room, not everyone agrees. Some women fear speaking up. Some think the rules are unfair but do not want to lose a job they fought to get. Some have been taught that complaining is unattractive, and unattractive is treated like a professional hazard. Some believe the standards protect the glamour of the job. Some suspect the glamour has been protecting management. There are generational differences, regional differences, company differences, and the simple human difference between women who can risk trouble and women who cannot. You listen. You weigh your own position. You may love the job, which makes the unfairness sharper rather than easier. A rule can be wrong even if it is attached to something you cherish. That is one of adulthood's less marketable discoveries. Management responds in the language management prefers. Reviews, policies, committees, statements, delays, exceptions, denials, adjustments, and the occasional reform introduced as though the company had invented justice between flights. Change comes unevenly. A rule may soften in one place while remaining firm in another. A woman may win an argument but still carry the cost of having made it. A category may be opened, then guarded by new informal expectations. The old image does not vanish. It learns to negotiate. Still, the questions matter. They gather, they make the rulebook less silent. You begin to imagine a sky where experience is not treated as aging out, where marriage does not end skill, where motherhood is not assumed to cancel competence, where race is not filtered through passenger comfort, where a woman's value is not measured by the company's preferred fantasy. The aircraft still boards, the meals still go out, the call button still rings. But somewhere beneath the hum of engines and the rustle of newspapers, a different sound has started. The soft creak of a rule book discovering that paper can tear. You prepare for a flight knowing that a marriage announcement, a birthday, a supervisor's comment, a weight chart, or a policy meeting could alter everything you have built in the air. The uniform hangs ready. Your shoes wait by the bed. Your hat sits on the dresser with the expression of an object that has never paid rent but has opinions. You may love the job. You may be tired of it. You may want a home, a career, a husband, no husband, children, no children, more flying, less inspection, or simply the right to decide without a company rule hovering over your shoulder like a poorly dressed ghost. The morning begins with ordinary rituals, which is often how important days disguise themselves. You wash, dress, pin, powder, smooth, fasten, and check the mirror. The face looking back at you is familiar and slightly official. It knows how to welcome passengers, how to carry coffee, how to answer flirtation without feeding it, how to hide fear during turbulence, and how to make a hotel room feel less lonely for one night. It also knows that this life has been granted with conditions. The job has opened the world, but not without keeping a hand on the door. Perhaps you are engaged and have not told the company yet. Perhaps you are approaching an age that used to sound distant until the calendar became personal. Perhaps a supervisor has mentioned your weight with professional softness, which is somehow worse than bluntness because it arrives wearing perfume and files. Perhaps policy is changing and nobody knows what that means for you. Perhaps you simply feel the pressure of everyone else deciding how long your adventure should last. You put on the uniform and wonder whether you are dressing for work or for evidence. Each object carries memory now. The jacket remembers your first flight, when your hands shook slightly while fastening the buttons. The skirt remembers long aisles, turned knees, spilled coffee, and the careful way you learn to bend without giving the cabin another topic. The hat remembers terminals, introductions, inspections, wind, hotel rooms, and every time you had to be more cheerful than the hour deserved. The shoes remember everything and forgive nothing. You pack your bag with the usual items: lipstick, comb, powder, spare stockings, perhaps aspirin, a handkerchief, a book, a letter not yet answered, and the private knowledge that a woman's life can be both glamorous and administratively fragile. At the airport, the terminal shines as if nothing uncertain has ever passed through it. Passengers move beneath clocks. Announcements murmur. The gate agent sorts papers. A child presses his face to the window. Businessmen smoke and study newspapers. The aircraft waits outside with its polished indifference. Machines do not care whether you are at a turning point. They simply require procedures. That can be comforting. You know what to do. Check the cabin, count supplies, secure the galley. Smile at boarding, watch the nervous. Manage the difficult. Serve, reassure, listen, lift, pour, bend, brace, and make the strange arrangement of flight feel ordinary for everyone else. Work gives the day structure when the future is too large to hold neatly. You greet passengers, and the old rhythm returns. Good morning, welcome aboard. Right this way, let me help you with that. Your body knows the choreography even while your thoughts wander. A woman notices your uniform and smiles with admiration. A man compliments your appearance, and you file it in the drawer marked "Not Now." A mother asks for help with a child, and you soften at once because some needs are real and do not arrive with arrogance. The aircraft fills, the door closes, the flight begins. Somewhere between takeoff and meal service, you look down the aisle and feel how strange it is that something so temporary can become a life. Rows of passengers lean into light, smoke, newspapers, cups, pillows, and conversation. They will leave at the destination and barely remember you unless something goes wrong or you were especially kind. Yet you will remember pieces of them, because service work collects fragments. Their fear, their jokes, their requests, their sleeping faces, their complaints about sauce, their gratitude, their entitlement, their small human softness when the aircraft dips. You have carried all of it through the sky. Maybe this is your last flight under one rule. Maybe it is your last flight before marriage, before dismissal, before a transfer, before a fight, before a policy change, before deciding you are done. Maybe it is not last at all. Maybe the uncertainty is only another passenger that boarded without a ticket. Still, the feeling deepens as the cabin settles. You realize that the question is not only whether the airline will keep you, it is whether you can keep all the versions of yourself that the job has required. The smiling woman, the trained professional, the obedient employee, the traveller, the tired roommate, the daughter on the telephone, the woman who wants more than permission. Near landing, you check belts, secure trays, straighten the cabin, and prepare everyone else for arrival. That is what you do. You prepare people for arrival, even when you are not sure where your own future is supposed to land. The wheels touch the runway. Passengers exhale, gather coats, and become themselves again. You stand by the door and smile goodbye, while the hat on your head continues representing certainty with impressive little nerve. You walk the aisle after the meal trays are cleared, the cabin lights lowered, and the passengers have settled into the soft, uneven sleep of people who believe the work is mostly over because their own eyes are closed. Cigarette smoke hangs faintly in the air. Coffee cups sit cold. A blanket slips from a shoulder. A newspaper folds against a sleeping chest. The engines hum steadily beyond the windows, and for the first time in hours, no one is asking for anything. You check the aisle, straighten a pillow, glance toward the galley, and stand for a moment in the dim hush of the aircraft, a woman suspended between service, scrutiny, fatigue, freedom, and the strange piece of a job that made you smile all day while carrying everyone quietly through the sky. This is the hour that advertisements do not quite know how to use. It is not glamorous in the bright poster sense, not all white gloves, shining terminals, and smiling faces beside polished jets. It is softer than that, and truer. The cabin has become a little floating dormitory of strangers. The businessman who demanded attention now sleeps with his mouth slightly open and his tie loosened. The nervous woman who watched your face during takeoff has finally closed her eyes, one hand still resting on the armrest as if peace requires a witness. The child who discovered the call button has surrendered to sleep, cheeks flushed, shoes tilted toward the aisle. The honeymoon couple lean toward each other under one blanket, private weather quiet at last. An older man keeps a cigarette between his fingers until you gently remove the ashtray closer to him and decide not to disturb the small republic of his dreams unless safety requires it. The cabin smells of smoke, coffee, wool, upholstery, perfume faded into fabric, and the dry metallic air of flight. Outside the windows there may be stars, moonlight, clouds, darkness, or the faint glow of a city far below, appearing briefly and then vanishing behind the wing. Inside, the aircraft is all low lamps, small sounds, and sleeping vulnerability. You move quietly because even your shoes seem louder now. Earlier, those same shoes crossed terminals, braced against turbulence, answered call buttons, carried trays, and stood through boarding with the bright patience of public performance. Now they move down the aisle with the caution of someone walking through other people's borrowed trust. When passengers sleep, they become less demanding and more human. The man who snapped about his coat is just tired. The woman who complained about the meal is someone's mother, sister, neighbor, or lonely traveler with a reason you do not know. The child who made crumbs everywhere is a small person being carried through the night by machinery, strangers, and a mother who may finally have 1 minute without apology. The cabin softens when nobody is performing. Perhaps that is why the quiet feels precious. You can almost hear the work underneath the work, engines holding steady, cabin systems humming, pilots speaking up front in low professional voices, the galley cooling, ice shifting in a container, paper rustling when someone turns in sleep. You check what must be checked. Seatbelts where needed, aisle clear, blankets safe, cups collected, cigarettes watched, lavatory light, galley secured, no loose objects waiting to express themselves during descent. Your training continues even in the quiet. Calm is not the absence of attention, it is attention with its voice lowered. You think of the day behind you, or the many days that have begun to blur into one another. The interview room, the scale, the training commands, the uniform inspection, the terminal eyes, the boarding smile, the meal trays, the coffee, the call button, the flirtation, the turbulence, the hotel room, the apartment, the family phone call. The rules that tried to make youth and obedience look like destiny. All of it is here with you in the dim cabin, packed more tightly than luggage. You are tired, but not defeated. The job has taken much and given much. It has measured you, watched you, praised you, limited you, displayed you, and taught you to cross the country with a steady hand. It has shown you cities, unfairness, friendship, loneliness, competence, and the strange human truth that almost everyone becomes less impressive when they cannot find their seatbelt. You may not know what comes next. The rule book may change. Your life may change. The airline's image of you may eventually become too small for the woman you have become inside it. But for this moment, above the sleeping rows, you are not only an image. You are the one still awake. You are the one who knows where the exits are, which passengers were afraid, where the cart is latched, whose coffee spilled, which child finally slept, and how to make the cabin ready for morning. The engines continue their deep, steady sound. The aircraft carries everyone forward through darkness, and you stand in the aisle with your little hat, sore feet, steady hands, and a smile resting at last. No one is asking for anything. Naturally, that may be the closest air travel comes to mercy. And now, you can let the cabin grow quiet. You have spent this long, soft journey among polished terminals, little hats, white gloves, weight charts, careful lipstick, meal trays, coffee pots, call buttons, cigarette smoke, hotel rooms, shared apartments, family telephone calls, and all the strange rules that tried to turn a working woman into a symbol before admitting she was a professional. You have seen how the 1960s stewardess could be admired and limited at the same time, praised as modern while being inspected like luggage. trusted with emergencies while being treated as if marriage, age, appetite, or a loose curl might threaten aviation itself. It was glamorous, yes, but not simply glamorous. It was tiring, skilled, watched, exciting, lonely, funny, unfair, and sometimes quietly brave in ways no advertisement could fit beside a smiling jet. So we can honor the women who walked those aisles, not as perfect icons in little hats, but as real people with sore feet, steady hands, quick judgment, private ambitions, and the patience to keep smiling while carrying everyone else's nerves through the clouds. And we can feel grateful gently and without smugness for the ordinary comforts now around us, the right to age, to work, to rest, to choose, to say no, to sit down, to breathe cleaner air, to travel without treating a woman's waistline as part of the flight plan. The engines are fading now, the cabin lights are low, the trays are cleared, the hats are put away, the hotel alarm is quiet, and the old rulebook has closed for the night. You are back in your own room, in your own time, safe beneath your blanket with nothing to serve, prove, pin, polish, or politely explain. Let your shoulders soften. Let the sky outside become still. Let the passengers sleep. And let yourself drift gently down into the quiet where no one is pressing the call button anymore. Good night.